Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Good morning.
Hi, Dia.
Good evening.
Evening. Well, I rolled out of bed.
It's early for you, right? It's are you 10 o'clock?
No, it's 10.
Tom is here as well. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Lars. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah, finally, we're seeing each other.
Yes, I know. Otherwise, it was just by email.
It's email and the Facebook group.
Yes, indeed.
Tom, Lars was just letting us know that you guys already know each other online, which we thought was really cool. So
Yeah,
welcome to
well,
the group.
I dipped a finger into his book when he was writing it. So
yeah,
that's amazing. So we'll wait probably just one more minute and then we'll get started. We do expect quite a big group today. We had around 25 people who registered. So hopefully they'll join us as the time trickles in, but because of time and being mindful of that, we'll get started in probably about one more minute.
okay. Well, we're just in time for sunrise here.
Where are you located?
Hawaii.
Oh, it's early. What time is it there? 6?
6 o'clock. Yeah.
Wow.
It's the same as here. It's just a 12-hour difference now. It's 6 o'clock
It
p.m.
was a little easier for you than for me.
Well, thanks for joining, Tom. That's great.
Yeah, that's how much I like you guys.
What part of
Is that-
Hawaii are you located by?
I'm on the Big Island of Hawaii, on
Okay.
the east side, and where the volcano erupted 4 years ago, 4 years ago.
Okay,
So
gotcha. Okay, well, it's 12:03. I think we can go ahead and get started. My colleague Pamela Silberman and I are here today from STANA. Pamela is going to go ahead and do some brief introductions, lay some ground rules for everyone, some housekeeping items to help us have a more smooth conversation today. And then I will be leading the questions with Lars. And then at the end, we'll have some space to ask some questions. So I will pass it over to Pamela and she'll get us started.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here today. As Katie mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of the Smell and Taste Association North America. We founded it with expert advisors from Monell and as well as Dr. Paulie Joseph from NIH and also another patient representative, Marge Rosner. We do have, the three of us are all acquired anosmics, and we would love to get some volunteers who are congenital anosmics to bring in a different perspective and a different experience, which Lars' book has just opened my eyes to that. And so we really need that in this community as we move forward growing STANA, because we're still a very young organization, just formed in 2020. As I mentioned, I'm an acquired anosmic. I lost my sense of smell due to a sinus infection about 13 years ago. We launched this book club with the goal of creating a safe space, place for our patient community to come and exchange ideas, talk about books we've read, but also get to know each other. This is our third session. We're going to have one more book session in 2022 when we're going to read the book called Flavor, and we will send out more information about that as the date gets closer. Today we have an hour with Lars Lundqvist to talk about a world without smells. And a couple of ground rules before we jump in, but I wanted to, as you probably saw when you came into the call, that we're recording it. After this is over, we're going to post it on our YouTube channel for anybody who missed it, that they can watch it at a later date. If you want to have a question, you want to jump into the conversation, you could use a reaction button by putting your hand up on the screen or using the chat function. And we just want to make sure that everybody's respectful of each other on this call, making sure that everybody's comfortable, and that when you are talking, to try to keep your comments brief so other people can participate. And when you do start to talk, we want to make sure if you could introduce yourself, if you're able to come on camera, that's great. Let us know where you're located and what your experience with taste and smell has been. With that, I'd like to introduce Katie and Lars. As I mentioned, Katie is a co-founder of STANA. Katie's an acquired anosmic as well. She lost her sense of smell due to a post-viral infection in late 2008, early 2009. Katie created the Smell podcast in August of 2018. That's how I first got to know about her. She shares listener stories, scientific research and news about the world of taste and smell, and she's conducted over 100 interviews since it's launched. Katie is also an adjunct professor. She's a Fifth Sense ambassador and a member of the Patient Advisory Committee of the Global Consortium for Chemosensory Research. It's our honor to have Lars here today. Lars is a congenital anosmic. He's joining us from Sweden, where I understand he lives in the northern countryside at 64 degrees north, which for those of us in the US, that's at the equivalent latitude of Fairbanks, Alaska. Lars has a PhD. He's a researcher and associate professor of silviculture. For lay people, I understand that's forestry management. And Lars, you've really opened the book on anosmia, and specifically, congenital anosmia and what life is like as an anosmic. I know I appreciated your straightforward, factual approach to it, but also that you brought in your personal experiences and, importantly, your sense of humor. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Pamela. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started by first off asking Lars if you can tell us just a little bit more about your book, A World Without Smells. Just in case anyone here hasn't been able to read it, what's the overall premise of the book?
Oh, the overall premises. But the thing is, I mean, I was born this way. I never really thought about smells at all, generally, until one day, and that was like 5 years ago. Or no, it must have been more. It's 8, 9 years ago. Suddenly one day, when I suddenly got this sort of, wow, it came from nothing. I suddenly got this. My wife was away, and I just had this thought coming through my mind that she is not coming home from work tonight, so she won't comment on how the house is smelling. And then suddenly, wow, I had never thought about this before that way. So after having a sort of mental breakdown about this, and then I started collecting information. I'd never heard about the word anosmia. So that was one of the things. And then I realized there was no information literally in Swedish. So I actually tried to contact sort of the official authorities about it. No information. So I started searching in English, of course. And then suddenly, boom, there was lots of web pages, lots of information. And I just collected it for my own purpose, really. I wanted to learn about it. But eventually started putting it together and being combined researcher, teacher. The ideas eventually came up, maybe I should put this together. And the funny thing is that when I started doing this, when I started writing the first version of the book, I got this feeling I need to hurry before someone else beats me to it. I want to be the first book. And it appears I shouldn't have been so scared that anyone else would sort of beat me to it. So, but the thing is that, so I wrote the first book in Swedish, translated it, and realized that it wasn't any good. So I scrapped it, took the English version, because that's the only one that I got any sort of reactions on, and rewrote the English one, the English version completely, with the help of Tom was one of the ones that helped me. And there was also, I think she's from Netherlands, Dutch journalist living somewhere in somewhere other part of the world, Karin Mareike, and she also helped with this, came with ideas. And
That's
so
amazing.
I published it, and then I decided to translate it to Swedish, which was really the tough part. It was much easier to translate from Swedish to English than doing it backwards from English to Swedish, because there are a lot of sentences that you can make really short in English that becomes really long in Swedish. So it was actually more difficult to translate it backwards, back to a Swedish.
Were you expecting that?
No, I've never done it before. I've always translated from Swedish to English, but I've never done it the other way around. So this was sort of a new experience. I thought, wow, this is tricky. And it should be easy, because I mean, I'm better in Swedish, writing in Swedish, than in English. But it was actually quite difficult.
So you told us a little bit more about you wanted to learn more information one day about anosmia and having grown up with no sense of smell at all. So you started collecting this information, gathering it. So what was the moment that you realized that you were going to make it into a book? What was the inspiration behind that moment for you?
I think it was when I realized that there was no sort of collective, no one had collected all the information in one place in a simple way. So when I started writing it, I mostly wrote it for myself and for my family to explain to them. And so I didn't really have any ambition to make some kind of international book of it to begin with. I mean, Swedish isn't that big a language, so I actually sent it to a publishing house and asked them if they were interested, and the answer was very quick and very short, no.
I wonder if that answer would be the same today.
Probably not, but I mean, today, at the time, I think they thought also that, I mean, how many could there be in Sweden that could be interested in this? 10, 15, 20 people? I mean, there wouldn't be a big audience. So of course they weren't interested. So that's why actually the reason I translated it was I think that was after I found the Facebook group, when I started seeing the conversation going around and having this moment of, wow, there's more of us. I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm. That's so valuable. And so when people have found out about your book and you've spoken with them about it, how has their reaction been to the book when you speak with people about it?
Well, the thing is, I've only had reactions from abroad. I mean, there has been no reaction whatsoever in Sweden. But I mean, I haven't tried to advertise it in Swedish here. So I mean, so basically, it's the Facebook group that's been spreading it. And the nice part is when people have sent emails after having read the book and trying to explain, wow, we never thought about this. This was cool. And there was one young girl. I got an email first from her parents asking me if it would be okay for me to receive an email from her. She was like 9, 10 years old. And if I could please answer her.
Oh, that's really cool.
So that was cool, yeah. But also, I mean, people that's 70, 80 years old and wow, I've never read it. I've never learned anything about this. So that's sort of, wow, yeah.
That's good. So mostly positive reactions. Then
yeah.
I remember when I first read your book that I thought it was really cool. I think Pamela mentioned this at the beginning, but since I have acquired anosmia, it was really interesting for me to dive into your perspective, having never had a sense of smell and what that meant for you. And it opened up my mind to, although we all have anosmia, there's these different nuances to it from different groups. So that was really cool when I first read it.
Yeah, and one of the things I read about, I borrowed a book about blindness. And there they had one chapter about congenital blind people. And they described when they were meeting and they were after a while checking, is there anyone else around? No, it's just us. Good, I said. Then we can start behave like we want to because no one can see us. So they would eat with their fingers and they would sort of let go all these social sort of rules. Who cares? No one knows. So they also stressed the difference between congenital and acquired blindness. And I had never thought about that actually before until starting to collecting the information for the book. And realizing, wow, you're really living it. It must be quite different losing it than never having it. I mean, I don't think about smells generally. But it was fun because we were out in the forest yesterday picking mushrooms. And my wife, we talked about how the autumn in the forest is very special. We have all these leaves turning yellow and red, and it's really beautiful. And I really like the forest in the autumn. And she suddenly commented and said that, well, I know you can't experience this, but the smells are quite different in the autumn. It's really I said, oh, I'd probably blow my mind. I've just sort of, my mind is full of just seeing the forest and sort of sensing it in my way emotionally. So adding all these smells would sort of, how's that possible? It's just in the back of the mind. You don't really think about it. It's always there subconsciously.
Right. Well, I think the opening of your book is really interesting and kind of addresses the point that you're talking about right now, where you describe how you hear the noise of, I think it was like a lawnmower or a leaf blower or something like that. And you describe like how the person smelled it. And then like how the day went with the smells and walking downstairs to smell the coffee and how that doesn't exist for you. And I just think about that all the time because you're right. I can't tell that the coffee pot is on downstairs until I go down and see that it's on. And so just like the worlds that people are living in and what they're perceiving is so fascinating. I just thought that was a cool opening to your book. So since you've published it, obviously one big and unexpected thing that's happened is this global COVID-19 pandemic, which has impacted a lot of people who are now experiencing smell and taste dysfunction. So I'm curious, I mean, we spoke about it briefly at the very beginning, but if you have the opportunity to add that background to your book, how do you think the pandemic would have changed what you wrote, if at all?
I don't think it would have changed. I think I possibly would have added something. It wouldn't have changed the things that are already there. But what I've been thinking about revising the book, making a new version of it, expanding it, and including more science, because there's been some really interesting research done the last few years during the pandemic. And it began just before, but then it's gone on to sort of lots of new stuff being done around the world, but also perhaps dive deeper into this difference between congenital and acquired anosmia. Try to sort of get a hand on that.
Absolutely.
So, but it's strange at the same time. I mean, my reaction during the pandemic was that, wow, now people are getting interested, but they don't get it for most of them anyhow. So yeah,
absolutely. So one thing that I'd like to ask you about is when you were growing up, and when did you realize that there was something different for you? When did you realize that people were talking about smell and that you didn't experience it the same way that they were?
There's no such sort of eureka moment where I said, wow, but I think I gradually sort of grew into understanding that when people were talking about smells, I would talk about smells and make jokes about it. And the revelation was not that I couldn't smell, but that they actually could. That's also sort of a mental difference, because I'm not lacking smell. They have an extra sense. It's not that I lack it. So that's also a difference. So, I mean, the word's always been the same, but then realizing that when they talk about it, it's actually there for real for them. But I have no specific moment when I sort of thought about it, perhaps 10, 11, 12 sometime. But I do remember when I told my parents when I was like 14, 15, and they said, impossible. No. Then you must have lost it recently. And I said, if I had, I think I would have noticed.
Right.
So now they were astonished that they should have noticed. That was their first reaction. Of course, how is it possible that you couldn't have no sense of smell for 14, 15 years and we haven't noticed? Well,
I think it's more common than people think.
Yeah. But I think if you don't know that it might not be there, I mean, everyone knows that you can be blind or deaf, but I mean, no one talked about anosmia. You don't check children in the children care either. Medical care, when you make all these medical examination of small children, you don't check for if they have a sense of smell.
that was actually one question that we had for you, was that specifically if there were any kind of universal screenings for smell where
No.
you are from, right?
No.
Not in
There's
the
still
United
on,
States either.
there
Yeah.
still isn't. I mean, that's also, that I think is quite interesting. I mean, maybe they will start after the pandemic, but so far there's no talk about introducing such screening.
Right. Tom, do you have a question?
Well, yeah, Lars, I was wondering, because when I was growing up, one of the things, when I was in elementary school, they always had the test of close your eyes or put on a blindfold, and we'll put things under your nose and you can identify what they are. And there would be like an orange, or there'd be, who knows, a flower, a whole lot of other things. And I distinctly, and I never associated it with not having a sense of smell, which is funny. But all the other kids would get it and I wouldn't get any of them. Or I might get one or two because I guessed right, because that's what I was doing. But I wonder if you confronted that when you were in school, early on, if that was a kind of thing that happened, and I wonder if your reaction was like, not only just mine, but I think in the Facebook group, we're finding a lot of people have this reaction. Well, I maybe it isn't that good, or everybody's faking it too, and they're better at it than I am, or I'll learn what it is. I'll just keep trying and I'll learn what it is. So I wondered what your reaction was if you had those kinds of things happen in school when you were really young.
No, I have no memories of doing anything similar in school, but I know that we had at some point I was a Boy Scout when I was young, and we had some kind of competition, and one of the things we were supposed to do was to identify stuff. And like you, it never occurred to me that I was lousy at this because I couldn't smell it, and I never really thought about the others. They just knew what it was, so I thought it was strange. But I mean, it's strange that I didn't have a stronger reaction, and that the adults didn't notice it. But we never had. I mean, everyone has been writing on the Facebook group about these scratch and sniff tests. Yeah, but we never had that in school. Never, for some reason. So,
DS, you have a question?
I wanted to talk about that because you said scratch and sniff in correlation to how you never felt lacking. I always looked at it as the thing was broken. I wasn't lacking, the thing had the problem. So when the scratch and sniff didn't work, I was like, man, why do I always get the ones that run out of smell?
Mm.
So it's that I love that you also have that perception of it's not me. It's nothing to do with me. It's something else. So I just wanted to say that.
And I have a similar, because sometimes in the magazines there will be these sort of scratch and sniff stuff. So some kind, I don't know what it is for really, but they have that women's magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at some point asking about it and getting an explanation, and sort of just filter. That was just sort of filed in unnecessary information. It's irrelevant, completely irrelevant. Okay, but I have no more thoughts about it than that. Okay, so.
Yeah, so kind of speaking to these types of experiences when you're growing up, I'm curious if you have like a funny or most memorable anosmia moment that you remember from growing up that stands out to you. Like, was there a moment in school that something happened?
Well, I have one that's not in the book that actually happened afterwards. And it should have been in the book, because my wife was baking buns one day, and she was asking me if I wanted cinnamon or cardamom buns. And I asked her, what's the difference? And she looked at me like I was an idiot. And she didn't understand my question, and I didn't understand her question, because to me, the difference, a cinnamon bun is a bun it's like, you sort of roll it up and cut it, yeah. And the cardamom bun has a different shape. So to me, I mean, I think it's quite fun as an adult, thinking that the name of the bun had to do with the shape of it. and never ever connecting it with cinnamon and cardamom being spices.
Did she try to explain to you the difference in the flavor of the spices?
No, she just said that they are different spices. And I said, wow, the thought never occurred to me. I mean, we have what you call, I think, gingerbread at Christmas. Yeah, and in Sweden it's called pepper bread for some reason. There's no pepper in it. So for me, it's just a name. So if you call those cookies pepper breads, why couldn't you call a bun, a funny looking bun, a cinnamon bun?
Pamela, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. If it's sort, and I want to know like your personal answer, but I'm also sort of thinking from the standpoint of like advocacy for this community. Do you think that had it been detected earlier in your life that you're congenital, like would that have changed things? Would there have been, you know, more information or more assistance or something helpful if, you know, if in fact, like we did make a practice out of testing children at an age where they could tell us, would that have made a difference in your life?
I think so, because most of all, it would have affected the hygienic point of view, keeping clean, changing clothes, realizing that when you've been exercising and the t-shirt is soaking of sweat, it hasn't disappeared just because the t-shirt is dry again. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. I can find a t-shirt and it feels like, well, has it been washed or is it sweat? How do I know? It's just, it feels the same. It's shake it out in the air a bit and now it's clean again. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I loved your in your book the rules, using the rule, like living by the rules. I'm a rule follower, so you know, definitely like the rules of the road have been important to me. And you know, since I am inquired, I do sort of understand what the impact is, but I really appreciated that explanation, because yeah, having a set of ways of doing things helps you sort of fit in with everybody else, right? If you follow the rules. So I appreciated that explanation.
But and I think if you learn the rules earlier, it would be easier to follow them, actually. I mean, it becomes sort of a part of your habit, just like brushing teeth or whatever. So you change your socks, you change your underwear, you change clothes, you wash yourself. Some people sweat more than others. So you have to sort of, your parents can teach you early on, do like this. Okay.
Absolutely. Dia, you had a question next?
Yes. First, I want to say I'm still on the fence about believing people that once my sweaty shirt is dry, that it actually still smells. And I don't know, I halfway believe people on that one. But my question for you is back to the spices. So on the spectrum of congenital anosmic taste, where do you kind of sit on the taste spectrum?
I think I have a fairly good sense of taste, actually. I do sense difference between different kinds of red wines, and I think I appreciate food, and I think you need to have a fairly good sense of taste to be able to really appreciate food. And I am very particular about what candy I like and dislike, for example. I don't like most chocolates. If it's too much chocolate in it, I don't like it. And so I think I have a rather good, but then there are those things that are sort of a mystery to me as well. My wife, what is it? Parsley. That's it. The green that you have on one
Parsley?
of the spices. Parsley, yeah. And my wife will still ask me sometimes, do you want some? And I say, no, why? It's just sort of, it confuses the taste or the structure of it. It feels strange in the mouth, like an old grass.
Yeah, I agree with that. It looks like when you add like thyme or something on top, I'm like, there's not really any point for me. Tom, you have a question next?
Yeah, there's about a million things that come to mind in all of this conversation, but back to tests for kids. I would think that being able to test, and there's so many different causal factors for congenital anosmia that, one person might be missing olfactory bulbs and one person might have some miswiring in the brain or something like that, or missing something else. So it's not a single thing that can be tested for. But if you did, I would think that the safety element for children, if they know and if the parents know, would make a huge difference, because you often expect, do you let your kid cook something? Well, I'm going to let you cook something on the stove, and the kid goes off and forgets it. Hell, as an adult, I've done that so many times. I've burned so many pots and pans into an electric stove, I can't tell you. And so I'm wondering, have you ever thought about that, Lars? The safety element, especially for children, if there were a better way of diagnosing this?
Yeah, I think I have it in the book when I almost burned out the house with with toast, the toaster, leaving the toaster. I was just going to watch TV or something interesting, and there was smoke billowing from the kitchen out in the living room. And what are you doing? My parents would see it through the big windows that there is smoke coming out from the kitchen and sort of rushing into the house, and I was totally oblivious. And the funny thing is that they at that point didn't realize it either. They never asked me, didn't you sense the smoke? And I just said, they asked me, I said no, and that was sort of the end of the conversation. So that's also a bit strange. And yes, the safety part is important, and I have one thing that is really scaring the shit out of me. And we have these smoke alarms in case there's a fire. But when they malfunction and suddenly go off, that's one of the worst things I know. I mean, that's terrible, because I have no way of knowing if it's just malfunctioning or if there's really something happening. And it happened this summer again. Now I've learned somehow that we have one of these smoke alarms in the hallway that's sort of probably reacting to something outdoor coming in, whatever it is. So it's always one specific, and even if you change it and buy a new one, it's one position in the house. Something is happening when it's really hot outside. So now we've removed it, which is really stupid because we need to have it in the probably during the winter. I mean, and they have these advertisement about smoke alarms that are connected. So if one goes off, they all go off. And that would be, terrible. I mean, horrible. The whole house is sort of screaming, there's fire.
I understand exactly what you're talking about with it feeling so unsettling and like disconcerting. My husband travels sometimes for work, and recently, like a month or so ago, he was gone and the fire alarm went off, and I wasn't cooking anything, and I was very concerned because I was by myself and I couldn't find any problem. So I think it was just the malfunction like you're talking about, but I was going all over the house, like, is something on fire? Is something smoldering? Is there a plug that's on fire, like behind the curtain? So stressed by that whole situation, and I couldn't find it. So I imagine it was just a malfunction, but absolutely it is a big concern, especially if you don't have anyone else there to tell you, like, there's no smell of smoke or no smell of fire. Dia, you have a question?
Do you ever think about in the terms of the smoke alarm situation? I've almost burnt my house down 4 times, and the smoke alarm doesn't go off in time. That's what I found. So I have lots of smoke alarms, and it takes a good fire to happen before the smoke alarm in my house goes off. When you almost burnt the house down, when did that smoke alarm go off, or did it?
They didn't have any. My parents never had any smoke alarms.
Did you have animals that could have that my cat alerted me all 4 times? Yeah,
now but I'm not sure that our dog would alert me. He might think it's some kind of game. And the cat, no, she would probably just change room if she thinks it's too bad in here. No, but I sometimes I wonder if that's why I never light candles.
Mm.
Because I never like candles. I don't see the point of it really, but we do have we make fire in the kitchen. We have this we had an old open fireplace that we changed now, that it's fun to burn wood. It's always nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a scary thing and I do hope that the smoke alarms go off in case there really is a fire, because otherwise what's the point of it?
So Lars, this next question I want to kind of change gears and ask, and I know that there's a lot of different perceptions on this question, so there's no right or wrong answer. And again, just curious on your own thought processes on it, but do you self-identify as having a disability because you have congenital anosmia?
Yes. Disability, yes, but in Sweden we have a difference between having a disability and having it being a hindrance in your daily life. So does it hinder me in my daily life in some way? No, it doesn't really. I mean, I can still communicate, I can travel, I can work, I can do everything, but it is a disability and it does affect me in several ways, but most of it in ways that no one else will notice. So in that case, I mean, I couldn't get a permit for parking close to the store or something like that, but it does affect me. And nowadays I'm more sort of aware of it, and I realize various ways that small things in everyday life. But it's not really, I mean, I worked my whole life in research and it's never affected me that way. But it is a disability.
Right. I have the same personal opinion as well, so thank you for your feedback. This next question, I'm curious too, what you think. If you could have a sense of smell, would you want one?
No. No, absolutely not. No, I mean, and I thought about that a lot, because especially when I wrote the book, and the thing is that I can understand other people also that have some kind of something they're born with. I mean, this is me. This is who I am. And if I had a sense of smell, that wouldn't have been the me that I am now. Sort of. I have no idea what life would have been if I had a sense of smell. So would I have wanted it? No, not really. I mean, there's two things to this. The first is, if I could get it back now, would I want it? Definitely not. Do I wish that I would have been born with a sense of smell? Not really. Because the things I miss, I'm not aware of really missing out on things. And I like the way my life is. I'm not bothered about, we have a horse, and when we're mucking the stables and my wife will complain that it's reeking of urine, that she's been peeing all night. So they do pee a lot, horse, they have lots of it. So it's stinking inside the stable, she says. And to me, I'm just happy mucking the shit and listening to my books.
It doesn't bother you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I wouldn't have changed it.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you thought, Lars, because I know we've talked, this gets talked about on the Facebook group a lot. Like you mentioned, that someone who was born without sight, there are a few instances where people have gotten their sight back from surgery or some discovery that they found a way to get them to see again, and they have a very difficult time actually, because their brain can't process what they're seeing. There's all these signals going to their brain from their eyes all of a sudden, but there's no history of what any of it is, so it's a mess. It's a jumble of weird images, and it's almost hard to imagine what they might be seeing. And I would imagine the same is true with us, that if we've never had a sense of smell, there's no database in there of all of the things you learn when you're a child about smells, because you learn to associate what a good smell is and a bad smell is. I mean, the litter box might be joy to me if I had a sense of smell. I have no idea, because it's, there's no association with that being a bad smell. Like you said, the urine in the barn, you wouldn't know that was, even if you had a sense of smell, right? All of a sudden you wouldn't even know that was a bad smell. And I'm wondering if there's been any, if you've talked to anybody, or if there's been any research about that kind of need to rewire the brain, and what goes on in the brain in storing all that information about what a smell is and how you associate it.
Yep, and I keep in touch with some of the smell researchers in Stockholm, and there's been some studies lately and they have shown that we are actually using the smell part of the brain for something, but it's obviously not for smells. So the brain is using that part, and they don't know what's the purpose, what's the sort of, and that's quite interesting, I think. So if they try to rewire our brains, what would happen to that part of the brain in case it suddenly started getting a lot of information from the olfactory bulb? So I think restoring it, because they've also shown that if you are a normal person with who lose their eyesight, the seeing center of the brain slowly deteriorates, it disappears, sort of crumbles. But it doesn't really work that way if you lose your sense of smell. It's always there, ready to get going again. But in us, it isn't. It's used for something else. Dia.
Yeah, Dia, go ahead.
To answer this question, Tom, Lars, art imitating life, life imitating art, however you want to look at it, there are 2 episodes I would like to make you aware of. The first is on a show called Futurama, called Stench and Stenchability. That's the name of the episode. And the other is SpongeBob SquarePants, called No Nose Knows. And it exactly deals with that hypothetical what if. And ultimately in the end, the answer, hard pass. Don't do it. So you could take your information from art.
Thanks, Dia. And Royson, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, but thank you for joining and thanks for your thoughts in the chat. You said you've told people that you thought smell was just another societal construct, like pretty or popular or smelly. So it's interesting. Thanks for sharing. So Pamela has a few more questions, so I'll pivot it over to Pamela.
Well, this is a question for Lars, but also I'd be curious to hear other people's answers. So we'll start with Lars, and then if other people have an answer, put your hand up. But what are some of the strategies that we talked about following the rules, but are there any other strategies that you've used in your life to accommodate this, life without smells?
No, not really. And I thought about it a few nights ago when I was taking the dog out for this last sort of stroll. And if I thought of sum up my whole life so far, the time I have spent thinking about smells is a minuscule fraction, actually. I mean, most of the time, I don't think about it. It's not the first thing in the morning. I go outside and say, oh, I can't smell. I mean, I do all these things all day long, and then something happens, or someone says something, and then suddenly I sort of, well, there's one of those comments about smell again, and sort of file it away. Yeah, irrelevant. But it's not something that I think about. So I don't have a lot of, I have the rules about clothing, for example, or washing, but apart from that, it's literally, they don't exist, so they're not very interesting. But I think that's the best way of describing it. I don't go thinking about something that doesn't exist, but I'm sometimes reminded that for others, it does exist and it's important. And for me, it's irrelevant, but I sort of respect that to them, it's important.
Tom?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that one of the things in making adjustments, I think it's difficult to compensate for not having a sense of smell in reacting to things that people with a sense of smell would react to, because there's no trigger, there's no notification. I think I do the dishes every night, and the dish sponge, it smells apparently. I mean, it gets stinky. I had no idea until my wife said one day, how the hell can you, she kept saying, you gotta change that. You gotta change that. Well, there's no little color bar on the sponge that lights up and says, I stink now. I have no way of knowing. I could be using that thing for 6 months and it would never occur to me that the thing was really rank. So in terms of adjusting, I mean, how do you adjust if people use their sense of smell because it's a trigger, it's a signal, and it's just a signal we don't get. And so absent, flame or the sight of smoke, I wouldn't know, that I know I'm more aware of seeing smoke. And I've been in a situation in the house where I saw smoke before the other people in the house smelled it. But everyday stuff like that, like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to know that the sponge smells now. It's like, I mean, it's like food. Am I throwing away perfectly good food or not? And so the only adaptation that really we can make is another person that you trust well enough to be able to say, is this okay? And my wife is better about understanding that for her, it's like a visceral reaction to that stinking sponge. But for me, it's meaningless. And so she's gotten really good about saying, I think, or she'll just change it herself and not tell me. I just noticed suddenly it looks cleaner.
Yeah, dirty towels is the same.
Yeah.
How the hell can they be dirty when I use them when I'm clean?
And it's dry.
Yeah, but okay, if you say it's dirty, change them. I don't mind.
Katie, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, just as far as strategies, one for me in particular that's been top of mind recently is food. So I have eaten bad pork chops twice now, and I did it once a few months ago, and then I actually did it this week, and I didn't feel well. Like I didn't get full on food poisoning, but I knew eating it that something was off, but I wasn't quite sure, and it had been only like 3 days, so I thought it was okay. So I went ahead and ate it anyway. And so like a strategy for me moving forward is really like, if my husband is out of town, I'm not going to eat like meat or something like that, just because I don't know. And then when he came home, he actually did confirm that it was bad. Like he took one bite and spit it out immediately and was like, no, that's not good. So for me, writing dates on food has become more important. I literally have like masking tape and a Sharpie in the drawer, and I write, if it's like a condiment or something, I'll write when I opened it, not even like when it's gone bad or anything. I'll just like, I opened this September 23rd, so that I know when I opened it, and then I can get rid of it. Or I know I made this rice 5 days ago, it's probably bad by now. So those kinds of things for food have become really important for me. And Dia, you have a question next?
My strategy.
A response. Yeah.
Yes,
a response.
my strategy. The first strategy I have is to tell people that they will not offend me if they comment about my personal or my environmental smell, because that is the biggest block that I have seen smelling people have in helping, is I didn't want to offend. And this is not something I can say once. Lars, you talk about this in your book, how you have to remind, and we want people to remember, but to put it out there, to let people know, you will not hurt my feelings. I will not be offended. But the second rule that goes with that is, if you come into my home and you smell something, if you say something is happening on me, that's on you. to help me solve. It does me no good for you to walk into my house and go, oh, your house smells. Cool. What do you want me to do about it? So it's like, if you're going to comment, you're going to be the solution. So people in my life understand that.
I was with a friend yesterday and she was offering me a piece of gum and I said, I don't want it unless you're telling me I need it. Like why are you, if you're offering it to me because you're, and she's like, oh, no. Okay, great. I don't want that piece of gum, but I needed to clarify. Like, was that her subtle way of indicating, right? Another question I have for you, and Lars, I think, you touched on this in the book, like the fact that people don't have vocabulary that's helpful. So like, I'm kind of like, this is what makes me think, like, how can we help the smelling world? Like they certainly don't understand this, but they don't have vocabulary. Like their vocabulary is to give you a different smell, to tell you what something smells like. So I don't know if anybody had thoughts on that, but that was like we need a lot of work to be done on that in that area.
Rosen first.
Oh, me? Hi,
Yeah.
everyone. I'm Rosine. I'm in New York City and I'm in the Facebook group. So I'm seeing a lot of Facebook people here. Woo. I just want to say one quick thing on food safety is things that have gone bad to me, I detect vinegar in them. We had a soup here that was like a pumpkin soup or something, and I tasted it and was like, first of all, I had some bubbles on it, indicating like some maybe fermentation, and it tasted like vinegar to me. So I spit it out, and sure enough, it had gone bad. So it didn't taste bad. It just tastes like vinegar was in it, but it wasn't. So that's just like a taste that I look for, or try to detect in food, because if it's there, it means we shouldn't be eating it. And yeah, lots of agreement on everything else everyone's saying, but just wanted to throw that in. Knock on wood, I've never gotten food poisoning. I'm just pretty cautious, and I guess, and just label, like you said, Katie, when I open things, especially. Yeah.
And what was the question?
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted
No, but Pamela, the one she asked just before.
Was, a little bit of an open-ended, like, I feel like we need to help.
Yeah, words.
Word.
Yeah, but, words are. Words are important because words are the things we use when we think. And if I compare with my teaching, when we get new fresh students in forestry school, the first thing we do, the first year, we have to teach them all the words so they can see what's been done in the forest. Because if you don't, it's like when you learn names of flowers or names of birds. If you don't have a name, you can't tell them apart. You really need to see that this is this one, this is A and this is B. Wow, and they are different. And for that reason, I think we really need more words for describing this. And also it annoys me that in English, I can say that I am anosmic. But in Swedish, it becomes really strange because the word is, the Swedish version of anosmic becomes really, well, too long. So they say, you have anosmia. And I don't have something. I am something. That's a hell of a difference to me. If you have something, you have a disease. You have COVID-19, but you don't have anosmia because you can't have something that you don't have. And so you can't have a lack of something. You don't have it, which means that you are anosmic.
Mike Streleka?
Yeah, hi, this Mike I'm calling from Georgia. My connections in this is I actually have a teenage son who has congenital anosmia, which we found out about 8 years ago. He's had an MRI with no olfactory bulb. And first of all, I love the book. Thank you very much for writing it. I read it straight through to try and understand what he's going through. He, as you said, he feels like his world is much smaller, that he's missing out on 1/5 of the world. You touched on the anger and sorrow. He has a lot of sorrow and really depression. Now he has a very good group of friends, but until we became aware of this, you don't realize how often smell is brought up in TV, movies, just everyday life. And he has a lot of feel of isolation related to it. And he doesn't understand what smell is because he's never smelled. And I know nobody probably has a magic answer to this, but I'm just wondering if anybody has gone through this similar thing and has developed any way of coping with it, because as he has mentioned it to people, his friends are aware, but like you said, it's not a visible thing. So he may have met other congenital anosmics, he just doesn't know, because unless you ask somebody, they don't realize it. And I just, again, I love the book, and I thank you for writing it, and he's read it as well. But I just wonder if anybody had any thoughts on that, and thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's I have those moments as well, sometime when something happens and I sort of get sad of not being able to share that part of my wife's life, for example. I mean, she not being able to buy perfumes, not being able to, I don't appreciate the flowers she bring into the house, for example, because I would see them, but otherwise I wouldn't know that they were there. So, but I'm not, but I think that's also a question of personality. I mean, I've been the kind of person that's not, you have this half empty or half full. My life is more that it's almost full, even if it's just half full. Life is always, I'm always look at the bright side of life. I've always been that way. So to me, it's hard to sort of have those sad moments for more than a few minutes, really. And then life is pretty nice most of the time. But I mean, it's tough when because we do lose out on it. You should read the article by Marta Tafalla, explaining all this about how we experience the world through smells, or how we don't, but the other people do. Because reading the whole article was an eye-opener to me, at least.
Do you have the link to that article, Lars? But if you send it to me later on, I could share it with everyone who attended. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Dia, you have a question next?
I want to give a quick, huge plug to Katie's podcast, the Smell Podcast. Mike, this is for you and for your son. One of the best things that I can tell you as a congenital anosmic is finding identity, finding the name, finding the label, and understanding who you are within that. And when you listen to the Smell Podcast and you listen to the congenitals and you listen to the acquired, it will give him perspective. It will give him alignment. It'll give him community. That's the biggest thing I can suggest to him if he is feeling those feelings, because not a lot of congenitals do, or like Lars says, we do it for a split second. It's just not part of our lives. But if he's leaning into that, you cannot find a better resource than the podcast, truly.
Oh, thank you so much, Dia. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mike, I think you mentioned that he has friends and he has friends who know about his congenital anosmia. And if to help him feel better about that, I mean, I found that the friends that I can trust the most, the friends that are really my best friends, know about it and understand it. We can joke because people automatically forget, because it never occurs to people who can smell that I don't. And so, but they'll say something and I'll just give them my blank look that I've developed over the years, and they'll go, oh yeah, and then we all have a good laugh. But tell them it's a good test for good friends. His friends who he can trust to help him with this are the ones that he'll probably have for longer and stronger in his life. That's a positive for him. I think that's a plus for him. And if you can present it to him that way, it's like, hey, you've got this real power as a way of telling who you can trust and who you can't.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Amir, Did you want
And
to add
realizing
anything?
that he's not alone.
Mhm.
There's a lot of us around.
Absolutely. Amir, did you have a question or a comment to add? Oh, we can't hear you. If that's better.
Oops.
So while Amir is working on his audio, let's see if we can get it so that we can hear him. Lars, I know you said that you were thinking possibly of revamping the book and adding some items to it, some research. So if you do that, where can we find out about your progress?
If I do, I will definitely tell the Facebook group. I mean, the Facebook group is, I think it's one of the few Facebook groups that I actually follow and read when something is posted and try to say hello to new members. And I mean, Facebook with its bad and good things, I think Facebook has this ability sometimes to actually gather people from all over the world in a fantastic way. And I think our Facebook group, both the open one and the closed one, everyone is so super friendly. That's really nice. I really like that. I hope you saw that Jason Russell is back. He disappeared for a while, but now he's back.
Oh, good. I saw you were looking for him. That's great.
So, I mean, I will definitely tell people, but not until I'm done. I might have to ask for help for a few persons. And then if so, they will know before anyone else knows.
Awesome. Amir, can we see one more time? Maybe your audio is working. Now you're muted. So if you push the unmute button, we'll see if that helps.
You can unmute him, can't you?
I can ask to unmute, but I can't unmute anyone actually.
You can only mute
There is a bar at the bottom of Zoom that will allow you to unmute. And if you use the computer mute button, it doesn't affect it. So if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there'll be a pop-up bar that one of the things on the left-hand side is mute or unmute. Or you can also post something in the chat. And
Or
we
you
can
can
see it
press
there.
the space bar on your keyboard, hold it down. That'll unmute you.
No, it's still not working, Amir. I'm so
the
sorry.
microphone isn't.
Oops,
Zoom
wait a
isn't
minute.
connected to the microphone.
No. Could be.
Well,
You
if
can
you want
type-
to, yeah, if you want to type your question or response in the chat, then we could ask that way.
Yeah.
Darn, I wish we could hear you, Amir.
Now, the
So
Zoom
Lars,
is strange
do you have
sometimes.
Lars, do you have any other upcoming projects focused on anosmia besides the book update potentially?
Not about anosmia, because I have other projects. Like I'm almost finished writing a book about forestry, but that's something completely different. And there won't be anything about smells in that book. It's a typical silviculture forestry book, so handbook for foresters.
If you can't smell the forest, is it really there?
Yeah, exactly. All forests are the same because they smell the same. Now, I thought about it actually a few days ago when thinking about this event, that wow, I really spent a lot of time thinking about anosmia and smells and collecting information and writing the book. But it's like that was a project that I did. And now I'm sort of back to normal again, except that I follow the Facebook group. So I'm more or less retiring after Christmas. So then I will have much more time, and maybe I'll get bored of not doing anything. And that's when I'll start revising the book and starting writing new chapters.
Absolutely. Well, Lars,
But I
do
wonder
want
why
to...
is not anyone else writing a book about anosmia?
I have it in the back of my head. One day we might have a book about anosmia from my perspective. So we'll see.
You set the bar pretty high, Lars.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's really short book.
Yeah, that's good.
That's one of the sort of sour comments I got, that it's very short, quick read. So it should have been a longer, thicker book. So I have to make a
With
new
your
version.
update, yeah, with
Yeah.
the update, you'll beef it up a bit. But I wanted to say thank you to you, Lars, for joining us today and for talking with everyone. If anyone who's on today is interested in getting connected with STANA and getting involved in a volunteer capacity, following us, things like that, we would love to hear from you. Like Pamela and I mentioned, both of us and our other founding board member, we have acquired anosmia, and we welcome and celebrate the perspective of people who have congenital anosmia as well. So if you would like to get involved in some capacity, please reach out to us. I'll put our email in the chat right here before we wrap up. And Amir, I'm so sorry we can't hear you, but I can definitely follow up with you via email if you'd like to get connected that way. Lars put his email in the chat as well,
Yep.
anosmia@icloud.com, if you want to get connected with him. And just thank you so much to everyone for joining, for your thoughtful questions. And Lars, thank you for your book, and thank you for the time. We will be posting this on YouTube within the next 2 weeks or so. So that will go out on STANA's social media channels, but it's been posted to the YouTube channel if you'd like to rewatch the conversation. So thank you very much to everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day or evening. Thanks, everyone.